Welcome, everybody. This is the I Know Nothing podcast. It's been a couple months here. I got called out, so I'm bringing on a super special guest today, Alex Curro. Alex, obviously, I know who you are. What I've been having everybody do is give a quick background of your sport career, what you did in college, how you got to this point. But I'm also calling you out and saying, why should someone listen to you?
Mm. So I started in sports performance strength and conditioning actually with basically with you and at Athletes Warehouse back in high school. I was a high school baseball player and I played baseball my whole entire life and played baseball up until I started going to college, and then that was really the birth of my sports performance, strength and conditioning career. And that was all fostered by, the training that I had done for baseball leading up to college. I got Tommy John surgery going into my senior year of high school. So that kind of got me into the whole PT rehab area of sports performance. And through having it from both sides of rehabbing an injury and getting someone to like in a return to play lens, also seeing it from the performance side of training hard and heavy and trying to get bigger, faster, stronger. That the latter was really what I fell in love with. And, I was really fortunate enough when at the end of my high school career, I had an internship at a facility called ML Strength, which was right around the corner in White Plains. And the guy there, Dana Cavalier, was used to be the strength coach for the Yankees, and at the time, I wanted to be a pro baseball strength coach. And so I figured, if I go to him, he was a guy who had done it and, could get me to where I want to go. And I remember sitting in on the interview, so to speak, and he was like, "Hey, man, you're not going to really learn much here from to get you the major leagues, but at least I can hopefully help you, get on the right trajectory while you're helping us with our group fitness classes and things like that." And so he had pushed me to get an internship at UCF right as I got down there. That's where I did my undergrad, and that really got the ball rolling with most of my sports performance career. So I started at UCF, interned my 4 years there, and then each summer I would go somewhere different just to try to learn from some new people and really just again try to create as much momentum in my sports performance career as possible before I graduated so that I could really try to differentiate myself from everybody else. And I looked at it in that lens, but also I loved training and I loved sports performance, that it wasn't really like work for me, or I have to do this because I have to differentiate myself. Like that was just my purely my love and passion, and I just loved being in the weight room. So it was really fun to just like I wanted to go and learn more and become better at my craft. And so my first summer I went to Villanova with men's basketball, and then the second summer I went to University of Florida with men's basketball. The third summer I went to University of Kansas, and that was with all of Olympic sports. And then when it actually came time for my internship for undergrad, I ended up going to University of Arizona, which then COVID had happened. That got cut short. I come back to Florida and do my grad assistantship at Florida State, and then towards the tail end of that, I ended up getting called back by my old boss at Arizona to come back and be an Olympic strength conditioning coach over there. And I was there for about a year and a half. I knew I still wanted to get back into men's basketball. And a lot of that had spawned from, again, I wanted to be a pro baseball strength coach, but then getting thrown into the fire of all of Olympic sports. And, growing up in New York, there's not a ton of high level uh, universities when it comes to college athletics that are in the direct area of, say, Westchester County, New York. So a lot of that's just professional sports. You think that that's the pinnacle of sports performance. And I once I was in the South, it was just all college sports, and it was awesome, and that really got me going on basketball. So I know I wanted to be a basketball strength coach, and so I went to Arizona for the opportunity to, cut my teeth from an Olympic side, but also get great mentorship from my boss and the basketball strength coach there, and then that led me down the road to now where I'm at here, Fullerton, where I'm working with men's basketball and men's and women's soccer. And so, why people should listen to me, man? I mean, I think just from a experience standpoint, I've seen it at a lot of high levels in terms of from a basketball standpoint of, the team that I worked with at Villanova was a national championship team back in 2018, and so they have some proven success, and I have a lot of opinions as far as why that was the case, rather than some other teams, and really I think, I'm I'm just trying to stay ahead of the field and do my best in the positions that I'm in. So it's really, that's actually one of my biggest struggles as a coach is like taking compliments and speaking for myself, just because I'm a big believer of, man, I'm just doing my job and like just trying to do it to the best of my ability. So you're gonna get what you get, kind of thing.
I love it. I mean, I think anybody who just listened to your intro of where have you been, obviously they should be listening to, just so everybody knows, Alex said in the beginning, but when I initially started in my career, Alex was one of my first athletes in our top group. And we just reconnected and I didn't even realize your path. Obviously, we'd spoke about it. And I keep joking about it. I'm like, wow, this is so cool. This is an athlete I used to train who's now way smarter than me. This is sick. So now you're gonna
No,
educate, now you get to educate me.
yeah, no,
So
that's the coolest thing is that now it's like full circle. Now I'm talking strength training with the guy who taught me how to strength train. It's
I love
awesome.
it. It's really cool. Makes me feel a little old, but that's good.
Yeah,
That's all good.
it's no problem.
Okay, so I mean, obviously, with your intro, you've been a lot of places, and not just like low key. You've been at high level basketball at some of the best schools in the nation. You- I'm going to try to lead this like, okay, let's start with like the high school side going into college, and then I really want to pick your brain on what you've seen, at the college strength level, because I'm having not a tough time, but a good time trying to educate my future college athletes, but also my current college athletes. So something I want my athletes to hear right now, like from you, is what are some things that you think young, and I'm talking more so high school athletes should be focusing on in their training, the ones that want to go and play on, on the next level.
Yeah, I think even before we even start talking about training it, I think it starts with your habits and starts with, your ability to be consistent in what you do, whether that comes from a practice standpoint, whether that comes from a strength training standpoint, from a nutrition standpoint. Just, I think one of the things that some of our student athletes have trouble with sometimes is, especially when they're uber talented, there's not really a need for consistency because you could just show up and get it done. And so when you're at more so a level playing field, the classic example of, one small town superstar is now the bench player on a college team. uh, it's going to take a lot of consistency and a lot of consistent effort on a day-to-day basis to really, now push yourself past maybe whoever else is on the roster that's competing for playing time, and who may have a different asset than you from a physical standpoint, from a skill development standpoint. And so not having those habits built up beforehand can sometimes be new and really, daunting for some student athletes who maybe it just ends up becoming too much. It's not what they expected, and then maybe that could lead to burnout and things like that. So first things first, in high school, just building up the habits of, hey, I'm going to eat breakfast every day. I'm going to, consistently go and train, whether that's 1 day a week, whether that's 7 days a week, whatever that may be. Just building up the consistent habits of high performance at whatever level is feasible for you. And that doesn't mean that you have to go out and get on the crazy supplementation program, all organic grass-fed foods, the highest of high level training. Just get the ball rolling and get some momentum going into college, and that will set you up a lot better than most student athletes are when they come in, because, like I said, most of them don't know anything from anything in that regard. This is their first time maybe strength training. It's their first time anyone has ever talked about nutrition. I mean, heck, I'll take my basketball guys to the grocery store just to teach them about, hey, how do you shop at the store? How do you read a nutrition label? Some guys don't even know what a carbohydrate, a fat, or a protein is. I mean, they've heard the words, but they don't know how to decipher a nutrition label. What are they looking at? What am I looking at on an ingredients list? And so it's little things like that that if you could, they're very low effort, they're very low skill, that you could start to ingrain in your daily habits as a high school athlete, will create a ton of momentum coming into the college setting, because now all those things are already ingrained. And I think also when you're at home, you have a great support system. Even though you do have a great support system here in college, usually you have a handful of people, whoever that may be in your life, who are supporting you through, taking you to your AAU games, taking you to training. There's usually at least one or two people that are doing that for you. And so leaning on them for, an older person's guidance to say, hey, I know that training is really important. I want to get to the college level. Like, can you help me get there? Can you drive me here? Can you do whatever that may be? Order me these things online as far as, maybe it's getting on creatine, whatever that may be. But just getting the ball rolling with that, and then everything else will somewhat fall in place because there's nothing like college sports in terms of when comparing to high school, in the sense of the pressure's higher, the competition is higher, the structure sometimes or a lot of times is a lot higher, and the need for the ability to show up on time to your classes, be in attendance when your mom or dad's not taking you there, is going to make or break you, whether you think it or not, because now if you're not showing up to class, that's getting you in hot water with the head coach, and that's going to affect your playing time, regardless of how good you are at your sport. And so just getting those intangible habits down will make you a lot more adaptable and set you up for success in college to springboard you into a lot more of the progress that we all want to make from a physical standpoint, from a skill development standpoint, because the athletes that we get the most progress with are the ones that show up every day, give a great effort, and are just willing to be coached. Because more likely than not, as well, even from a sports performance standpoint, we could say, hey, you need to get your squat up to double body weight or whatever those standards may be for you as a coach. You have no idea who the sports performance coach you are going to get is in college, and what their standards are and what's going to be expected of you. So trying to build a foundation of just great habits and being adaptable to whatever situation you're in. And then on top of that, also building a great foundation. If we want to talk physical, just building a great foundation of movement, a great foundation of work capacity. You don't have to be elite in any of those levels, because you're going to have 4 years of college athletics to develop that and do that consistently on a daily basis. So in that sense, again, it's all about the momentum and the habits that you build that are going to set you up for success when you get to the college level.
So there's a lot of good stuff in that. I was just taking some notes here, but the terminology I've been using to my high school athletes is the low hanging fruit, and I think that's kind of what you're talking about. But can you touch on
Yeah.
those specifics? Because again, I didn't say it in the beginning, like the audience listening to this is it's athletes, it's parents, it's coaches, at least from my area. But like I'm trying to educate them in a way where it's like, hey, you're at the top of the top level, and this is what you're saying. What I'm finding is we want like the next sexy exercise. What's this special meal plan I need to be on? I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. You don't even sleep right. You don't eat right. You haven't been to workout on time yet. And you're just kind of reiterating those things. So would you mind just like touching, maybe you could just coast over like what are the broad low hanging fruits that, you think are good habits that they should be focusing on?
Yeah. So being on time is number one. I mean, I would say that is the one thing that pisses off coaches indefinitely and will never change, regardless of the sign of the times. Is if you don't show up on time, you are going to piss off a lot of coaches, just because it shows that you don't care, you don't have any respect for your own time, anybody else's time. So being on time, being dependable. We know that you're going to have good or bad day or good days and bad days from a emotion standpoint, especially in college. You're going through a lot of new experiences, whether that's from a personal side of things, from an academic side of things. It's not going to be all sunshine and rainbow every single day, but being able to stay consistent with your principles of I'm going to show up on time, I'm going to give whatever I got, whether that's 50 to 70 to 100% today, whatever's in the tank. So I think those two are paramount. And when if we were to talk about my coaching philosophy, that it has nothing to do with strength training, performance metrics, or anything. The bottom of my pyramid is the training culture and the habits, regardless of what we're doing, because those habits will make or break you, regardless of what training program or method that you put in place. And so I think having the habit of showing up on time and being a consistent effort every single time is one of the lowest, easiest. I shouldn't say easy. It's the simplest, lowest hanging fruit that you could do that anyone is capable of doing with a conceded effort. from a performance standpoint, I think coming in again with a foundation of work capacity, having some sort of strength training. That was one thing that I forgot to mention during my journey is another reason in that regard for why people should listen to me is I've also coached at the high school level. When I was in college at UCF, there was a local high school called Lake Howell High School in Orlando that I was the strength coach for their softball team for 3 years, and that was just a way for me to make some money and also just kind of sharpen my tools as a strength coach while I'm going through all these internships. And a lot of what I just tried to do there and what I found was useful was just getting really good at the basics of squatting, lunging, hinging, pushing, pulling, carrying, and just again creating a large foundation of movement capacity. And that doesn't mean I could totally get on a soapbox as far as people doing all these different crawling, van hanging, and all these different games, and let athletes be athletes. Like, I think that there's a time and place for that, but there's also a time and place for just basic strength training, squatting, pushing, but like basic movement patterns. It doesn't have to be gamified, all fancy and sexy. Just doing the basics really, really well and learning how to move your body in an organized, efficient manner, against the resistance, I think is really important. And those skills are transferable to all of those higher level exercises and higher level training methodologies. And I think if you do that you go to get onto those higher level training methodologies and exercises without having that base of general movement capacity, then you're setting yourself up for failure either through injury or just you're not going to get what you really want out of those high level exercises. So from a habit standpoint, that's really important. Getting in and strength training consistently, because at this stage in college athletics, if, at least at the D1 level, everyone is going to have some sort of strength coach. So it's not like, I could just, it maybe if you go to a JUCO or Division 3 or 2 or 3, you may not have a strength coach. And so, okay, you may not run into that. But if you're going to the D1 level or you aspire to be at the D1 level, strength training is a part of the culture, whether that's football, basketball, tennis, swimming. Everyone strength trains at this point. So the better you could set yourself up for success in that regard from a general basic standpoint, the more you're gonna be able to get out of that when you get to college. And honestly, I think you kind of have to have some patience with it because a lot of people want the fancy stuff that in this day and age of social media, it's the classic thing to say. You see all the Joel Siemens of the world and people that are putting out crazy exercises, and you're like, oh, that looks novel. That's really enticing, and I want to do that because that looks basically more fun and entertaining to do than just putting some 45s on the bar and squatting it. Like it's a lot more entertaining to do. So you're probably going to want to do that one more. But at the same time, that's again, you're probably not going to get what you want out of that. And then secondly, from that standpoint of it doesn't have like I said before, when you get to this level, you never know what your strength coach's philosophy is going to be. So getting hyper focused on these high level things is probably not going to set you up for as good of success later on. And so having that patience say, I'm just going to do the basics right now, get really, really good at it, that allows you to springboard into whatever your strength coach's training philosophy is a lot better than being hyper focused. And then to not continue to ramble because I realize I'm kind of talking in circles here
You're good. You're good.
of in that sense, like if you have that foundation, then again, that springboards you into whatever philosophy you're thrown into. And then also it allows for a lot more adaptation down the line because if it's the example of, if there's a fly in my room and I try to kill it with a flamethrower, well, there's going to be a lot of collateral damage there that, yeah, the fly's dead. I got the job done. But there, maybe you just burn down every wall in the room. And that's the same exact thing as, hey, we're using weight releasers with our high school athletes to develop eccentric strength. Well, it's like, okay, yeah, like that'll get it done, but that completely negates a lot of the training adaptation that you could have had when you actually should have used that down the line when you really needed eccentric hooks to push the needle on your performance when you could have just got it done with, hey, we're just going 5 seconds down on this squat instead of throwing 120% of your 1 RM on the bar and going down with it. So I digress on that. Just the basics and habits.
No, it's great. And to be honest with you, that whole thing right there might be a clip that I will show to my groups because and really to their parents, because I think it's so great hearing it from you because you've done it at the highest level of college sports. And we're missing a couple things that I took away from that, like having patience. You and I both know that like strength training to us it's fun, but to most people it's not fun to come in and do the same thing again and again. And the way I think of it as like a hybrid middle school, high school, college strength coach is like when someone comes to me in fifth grade, I'm like, this is sick. I've got 8 years. And then I get to hand them off to someone like you. The best, from the high school side, it's like the best thing that I can get is I send someone to you and you're like, wow, this guy moves great. Now I've got this person who I can go do the thing, your philosophy that you want to do with them. And like you said, like springboard them to the next level. The
Yep.
the allowing for that adaptation is so important, I think. And even though I'm reiterating this again and again every single day, when it's coming out of your mouth, it means more to parents and kids when you're holding the position you hold, where I'm just like, hey, yeah, I'm Matt, somebody from nowhere, coach nobody, and I'm telling you to be patient. No, you're telling them that here's what I'm seeing. You guys got to be good at these things because when you get to this level, like you said, everybody's already doing strength training. But if you're
Yeah.
doing all this fancy crap, don't expect that you're going to get massive progression and adaptation over time. So
100%.
I think that rant was awesome. So thank you for that.
I'll add one more thing to that, just
Please do.
from a standpoint of doing too complex of stuff too early when you're not ready for it, I think is again, from a marketing standpoint, if you're not doing your due diligence as a performance coach and hey, I got to throw them a bone and let them do these complicated things, I get it from a client retention standpoint, and you could speak on this way more than I could because I've never been in the private sector. You definitely have to play that game in terms of giving them what they want so that they come back so they can actually, get what they need, so to speak. And so you definitely have to play that game, no doubt. But it's an example of it is I've had athletes in the past. It's like, hey, part of our training program is we do cleans, and so it's like, have you ever Olympic lifted before? And they're like, yeah, like I've and they say it with so much confidence, and so they've done this, higher level training because they've probably never trained the front squat that well. They've probably never trained the hinge that well, and they do this bastardized version of a clean, and they're like, see, I told you. And it's like, you cannot clean. And you don't say it to them in that way, but you think that you're doing maybe you're from a parent's perspective, you think you're doing your kid your due diligence of saying, hey, they need to do all this stuff because this is what they're doing at the next level. Well, if they can't complete it properly at the high school level, well, then when they get to me, I don't care what your training background, you can't do it right. And if you're doing your due diligence as a strength coach, then you're gonna say, no, like you're gonna hurt yourself doing this. You're setting yourself up for failure by me continuing to overload this compensated pattern. You're gonna be regressed anyways. So the exercise that you were training for in high school, oh, I know that they clean at the next level. I have to get really good at that. Unless you've got a strength coach that is really good at teaching you the basics, that is going to set you up to succeed in that exercise, you're literally just taking 2 steps forward to take 5 back because the strength coach at the next level is gonna be like, I'm not taking that because I'm not gonna, hurt you in the weight room because oh, we have to clean, we have to do this. You're gonna be regressed anyways, and by your hand is gonna be forced to end up doing, hey, you're doing front squats, RDLs, and back extensions. It's like, well, but I cleaned in high school. Shouldn't I be able to clean? It's like, no, you didn't clean. You did some sort of jumping jack. The bar ended up on your shoulders. But so in that sense, again, having the patience and the foresight of, yeah, just because you're doing it now does not mean that you're going to be doing it in college, because then that's going to also be up to the standard of the performance coach. And to your point of, I think high school strength coaches are some of the most important performance coaches in the entire nation because you're setting the foundation. It's a student athlete in the middle school and high school time frame of their life is so adaptable and is so it's the example of if I had a 12-year-old and I told them to pick up a broomstick, well, they're probably going to adapt to that and get a little bit stronger by doing that. Day to pick that stick up 100 times, move that chair from one end of the room to the other. They're going to get stronger. Like I joke around with people because for me, when I my first year of high school or first year of college, I put on 15 pounds just from just doing basic training. We were talking about juggernaut and all this stuff. But I joke around. I'm like, yeah, half of it was just because I was cleaning up after men's basketball, picking up the 100-pound dumbbells and moving them back on the rack. And so at that, when you're so new to training, you're so adaptable and so such a novice that you don't need all those higher level exercises and training methodologies. And again, if you're not prepared for them, you're probably not going to execute them right. And if you don't execute them right, when you get to the next level, if your strength coach has any sort of standard, they're going to say, no, like that looks terrible. We're not going to do that because you're not getting anything out of that. And my job is to get you performing better. And if this method that you're bastardizing is not getting you better, well, then I'm not doing my job, so we're not doing it. So you're going to take steps backwards if you don't set that foundation already.
I think it's a good segue, and you're kind of touching on this right now, but you know, looking through the lens of high school athletes and parents of these athletes who do want to go play at the next level and who are training, kind of give us like an overview of, what should they be expecting from the weight room, from the strength training at the next level. And I know you're touching on a lot of it right now, but maybe just a broad view of, hey, here's what to expect. Obviously, every coach is different, but from what from what your standpoint is like, what should a kid be not only prepared for, but what should they be expecting when they move on to the next level?
Yeah, so I think it's going to depend on the program, depend on what sport they're playing. So on the maybe on the recruiting visit, or it maybe not on the recruiting visit, but just once you're committed somewhere and they're able to provide you with programs and they're able to provide you with, hey, we're a soccer team that runs the yo-yo intermittent recovery test. Okay, great. Well, then that's something that I'm going to have to prepare for because within the first couple of weeks of summer camp, we're doing that. So having those standards as to okay, what are the pillars of what's expected of me from a physical standpoint would be really important. And then I think from a standpoint of the student athlete getting provided training from the strength coach at the school they're going to, that's fine. You can get those programs, but I think when you have actual supervised training from, say, if you had an athlete that was coming to me, I would much rather just say, hey, Matt, here's what's expected of them when they come in day one, you know, go for it. Rather than me saying, hey, here's what you need to do without me. Only time I've ever seen you is when you walked into the weight room on your recruiting visit and, you left. There's no assessment there. I don't know where you're at. So for them to have the standards of this is what I need to get done, and then taking it to an educated professional, from a strengths perspective, say, hey, we need to prepare for this, could be really important. So it's very specific to whatever those, say, fitness tests are or strength tests. But also, I mean, if you're just preparing for getting into college, again, I think it just comes back every single time to just get a great foundation of strength. I mean, I think one of the best programs that you could do as a novice athlete is basically like in practical program, Mark Ripito, just the Texas method, 5x5. Hey, you're gonna have a high frequency of exposure to all these movements. You're gonna squat, bench, deadlift 3 times a week. Yeah, you'll throw in some sports specific exercises, but we also know that regardless of how specific you make your training, strength training is still general and it's still GPP for every single sport that you do. So you don't need to, you know, fall off the wagon in terms of your sport specificity and go super crazy with specific stuff because until they come out with some sort of scientific study that says if you increase your bench press by X pounds, you're going to get whatever X amount of miles per hour in your velocity. There's nothing that is a one-to-one correlate. There's definitely things that point us in the right direction and things that are correlated, but it's not, I should say it's correlation, not causation in a sense. And so having that broad foundation of movement capacity, of strength, is really going to, set you apart from an athletic standpoint. And a thing that I think back to all the time is this old YouTube video on for Eric Cressy of the strength speed continuum. And you think about how all of these athletes in any sport, it's all, unless you're a thrower, and even that, there's not much resistance on in team sport. So you're on this complete absolute speed side of the continuum. So a lot of times, the first thing that you need is going to be just general strength training. Just get your force capabilities up because you get so many reps and reps and reps of absolute speed. So you're just trying to bring yourself to the middle of power, so to speak. Force times velocity. So um, to sum all that up in a sense of get to know what's expected of you from your program from a conditioning standpoint, from a strength standpoint. Maybe that might be a little more outlined than say a football program. This is how we program, and get as much information as possible, and then take that to someone like yourself to say, hey, this is what I got to get ready for. Help me get there, because the supervised program is going to be a lot better, when they can get coached up by someone like you, than them just saying, oh, this is the packet that my strength coach gave me. It's a linear progression model that's just goblet squats and TRX rows. And, they're going to go do that at the LA Fitness. Like, they're going to be a lot better off if they go to someone like you who could really guide them, coach them up, and give them specifically what they need based off of an assessment to get them ready for what they're, about to incur.
I love it. It's just a ton of good information. Like I said, 40 minutes flies. So right now we're at 6:30.
All right.
This is great though, because I don't want to rush it. And so just take your time. But I think it's good to, for you and I, it's good just to chat on this stuff all the time. But
Yeah.
definitely would love to do a part two. I'm going to say that now because we might just get cut off at the end.
Yeah.
There's several other things that I wanted to go over with you, so I'm going to save them. But because you're in season right now, and because this is a topic that you and I have just discussed recently, I don't really want to go too far into the weeds. Maybe this can lead us to another conversation, but you are in season. You've trained the highest level of college basketball. Can you just explain in your world, your basic philosophies of in-season training, how or why you do it, and what you've seen over time with how in-season training can either be good or bad or indifferent or whatever? Because this is a big topic for us right now that we're trying to educate the kids, and kids don't know, and neither do the sport coaches, especially at the high school level and the low level, colleges. So just curious, all of those things. Maybe we can start with a broad view and dive in.
Yeah. So first things first with in-season training, regardless of what your training philosophy is, I believe the number one thing is having feel in season. You have to have feel for the athletes. You have to have feel for how the season is going. Have to have feel for what's needed at that time in the year, and also have feel for what preceded the season. Because I'm a big believer of the harder you train in the off season, the greater foundation or the greater ability you're going to have to train hard in the in season. If you're consistently training at a low level in the off season, well, then that's going to lead you to have to train at a pretty low level in season, because if you're saying, oh, it's in season, it's go time, we got to go. Well, now you've just ramped up their workload exponentially. And then, yeah, you're going to be tired, sore, and going into your games and not be able to perform, of course. So I think the start of in-season training is out of season. You have to have a great off season to set yourself up well for in season. And then once you actually get into the season, have feel for the athletes, have feel for the situation. It's going to be really easy for you as a strength coach to say, "Yeah, I'm a little tired from the flight last night, but I'm ready to train." And it's like, well, you didn't play in the game, so
Right.
it's a completely different experience for them. So having a good connection and foundational relationship with your athletes is really important so that you can get actual feedback. A lot of that, you're going to have to know who to ask, who's going to shoot you straight, and who's going to, feel sorry for themselves or, just want to get out of it because it is in season. So first things first, feel out the situation, feel where you're at. Secondly, or kind of number one, set up a great foundation in the off season. And then once you get into the actual training program, it really just depends on your game schedule. It depends on how much frequency you have in the off season going into in season. And then also, you know, you have to think about the dynamic of your coach. Think about the dynamic of maybe in the private sector. How often are they going to be able to get to the facility? You know, those logistical questions are going to be the first things that you're going to have to outline because you have to answer that question. Well, how much time do I have? Fortunately for me here at Cal State Fullerton with our men's basketball team, our head coach loves strength training. He wants the guys in here, you know, being physical as a part of our culture. And so, you know, the weight room is basically a part of practice. We'll start up, we'll get our film in for, say, 30 minutes. We'll come in here in season 30 to 45 minutes, depending on the day, get something done on the daily, and then we're going out to practice. And so that might look different 4 days out from game versus we've even trained on game day. And all I, you know, the way I phrase it to the guys is we're just looking for a net positive out of this room. Doesn't mean that every time that we get into this into the weight room, we're throwing more weight on the bar and everything has to be a relative strength session, you know, get stronger, bigger, faster, stronger. Sometimes it's recovery. Sometimes it's, you know, maybe a work capacity circuit of some sorts. Again, that all comes down to having feel, also having some sort of evaluation tool of seeing where they're at physically, whether that's a force plate, whether that's, you know, you could do hand grip, dynamometer, having some sort of proxy of figuring out where they're at when the motion is, you know, taken out of it. Obviously, emotion is going to factor into some of their performances on that, depending on their level of effort. But having those proxies to tell you some real information of where they're at physically, what they need, and then being just really direct in your training. It could be extremely easy to say, man, I only got 2 days in season, but I have all these things I want to get done. You're trying to squeeze every single thing in 2 days. Well, it's like, again, you're setting yourself up to overtrain at that point because you're trying to, you know, pay $1,000 bill with $100 in a sense. And so, in that regard, be extremely direct. You know, do it at a low to moderate volume that is recoverable. But again, you know, I say low to moderate volume, but some people may look at my in-season program and be like, man, you're crushing these guys. Well, it's like, well, because we trained hard in the offseason. So this is low to moderate for them. Versus again, if you take your offseason um, uh, kind of lightly, well, then you're gonna have to take your in season lightly. So, with there being less than a minute left, I'll stop there. But that's the basic, you know, overview of it all.
You know what? I think this is a great start for episode one because we're going to need. I have several other things I want to go over with you. Let's just call it there for today.
Yeah.
I appreciate you coming on, dude. I know you're in the middle of the season right now. Where can people find you if they want to reach out to you, ask you questions? You know, do you have an Instagram, anything like that?
Yeah, so my Instagram is Curro Strength. That's Curro Strength. Instagram, I'll always reply to my DMs. You can email me as well. My email here at Fullerton's acurro@fullerton.edu. Both those avenues are probably the best way to contact me. And you know, I love to talk training, so let's have at it.
Love it. Maybe we can maybe do episode two after the holidays.
Let's do it.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate you.